Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Theo, I'm a life sound engineer, and today we're going to be taking a bit closer of a look at this Pro2c control surface. So today, what I'm going to show you is I'm just going to do a walkthrough of every fader, every button, every knob, and every LED, and just give a brief overview of what it does. Obviously a lot of the stuff on here serves double duty with a lot of things, but kind of the main idea with this video is that after watching this, you should be able to walk up to one of these desks and have at least some idea where things are. But you know, if you've just always wanted to know what's about and what's going on, then stick around. This is going to be my breakdown of the Pro2c. So to start with, we're going to go around to the back of the desk where most of the I/O is. Right, so starting from right to left, all the way over here, we've got two USB ports. They're USB-A, you can use them however you want, but this one right here currently has the keyboard plugged into it. This one I'm not using for anything, but you can, you know, just leave a USB stick in there with extra storage or anything you want, however you want to do it. Down here you have a secondary screen output, or I guess primary, if you don't consider the fact that this screen is outputting already. But you can do external screens which will just mirror what's on there. That is, I believe that's called a DVI port, correct me if I'm wrong. Next over we've got Ethernet control. This is where you would plug in your Wi-Fi router to get the like the iPad talking to it and everything into there. Dual power supplies here. These are just fairly standard computer power supplies as far as I'm aware. Replaceable, and yeah, basically they run redundant. So currently when they're both running, they both run like slower fan speeds and things, but they split the load, and as soon as you can basically just kill one of them, which obviously is the same as either this cable or this power supply going out, and the other one just takes over full force, ramps up its fan speed, and now that's doing the whole system. We'll leave both of those on, obviously. Moving across to this panel here, at the top here we have got XLR inputs, 8 of them across the top. Those are the same preamps that are in the stage box, so they're lovely. They're obviously Midas designed, made and everything. Then we also have 8 analog XLR outputs, which are, you know, for however you want it. You then actually have another 8 analog outputs that are sort of pre-assigned to things, but you can obviously repatch this however you want. And those are talk out, master outputs, left, right and mono, monitor A left and right, monitor B left and right, but you can reassign those to whatever you want inside the software, so you effectively just have 8 in, 16 out on the surface, which is nice. And then you also have AES3 sync, AES3 sync, input and output down here, and then AES3 actual audio in and out, which is obviously digital AES3 but on analog, XLR connectors. So you've got in 1 and 2, out 1 and 2, in 3 and 4, out 3 and 4. Down the bottom here, we've got our 6 AES50 ports. These are bi-directional, as if you know what AES50 is. Usually I would have the stage box plugged into these two. This one is a gap, and then these two here go to the DN9650. And then I can add another cable to that if I wanted to go up to the full channel count on the DN9650. Still have 1 port left to add 8 more inputs maybe, who knows, whatever you want to do. Yeah, so next to the AES50 we get into the word clock world of word clock. Just input and output for word clock here, and then you also have video sync. These are all BNC connectors. The video sync is very useful if you're doing broadcast. Then next you've got a foot switch input, which I couldn't even remember was even on this thing when I bought it, but that is a TRS, which allows you to have 2 different inputs coming into it, but that you can just plug any sort of generic foot switch in, and that will allow you to have one of the buttons be tap tempo and the other one to be next scene, I think. And as far as I'm aware, you can't change them to anything else. You can change which button does which, but I think it's pretty much just you're stuck with those 2 options, but still that's lovely having that option there. And then you also have MIDI in, out and through, because you can generate MIDI commands out of this desk. You can also have it be triggered by MIDI commands, and obviously through to go to wherever else you need. And then right over here you've just got a little diagnostics port, which hopefully you never have to use. And then the last thing up here is the lamp input, which is how we're currently getting light. But that is a 5-pin lamp input, I do believe, or output, I guess. Have a look. Yeah, 5-pin. So into that, this is just a little light, I think they're called. I don't know, it came with the desk. But yeah, that's your basic I/O at the back of the console. So coming back round to the front of the desk, look at that, a 4x3 screen. What year is it? 1990. So, for the Pro2 Surface itself, you have three main ways of interacting with the software package that's inside it. That would be the actual surface itself with all the, the faders, the encoders, the buttons and everything. That is one way that you interact with the software and tell it what you want it to do. For anything that doesn't have a actual hardware button or knob or fader or whatever else it is inside the software, you've got the trackball here, which you probably, I don't know if you can see on the screen it moving around there, but yeah, just a standard trackball with a left and right click just above it, which also has all your different screen access modes there as well. So this is a very crucial area of the desk right here. And then the other method that you have for sort of interacting with it is the keyboard, which is down here in a little one rack U drawer, which is just a standard. This is the one that comes with the Pro 2, but you can use any USB keyboard you want, just in a little slot down in there. And yeah, that allows you to name things and stuff like that. Pretty basic functionality, but saves you from trying to do it by clicking on things or having to use the iPad to do it. So this section over here is what we would call the input section. Seeing as this is a digital desk, sort of everything can kind of be everything, so it's not specifically only the input section, shown by this input-output selector button over here. So for each of these channels, you have a screen at the top, which you can change the colour and the text on. This is currently kick, snare, groups, that's why they're blue, not pink. But then underneath that, so you have your select button itself to actually select the channel. You've got mute button, solo button, an 11-section LED meter to show you what's going on, and then the actual fader itself, which I believe is a 120mm. I'll go get a tape measure. 110mm. On either side of the screens you have two scroll buttons to go left and right. This allows you, when you're in your regular input mode, to just cycle through all of the channels as they turn up in blocks of 8. Works the same for your outputs as well. And you can get a pretty little light show out of it. So just above the input faders, we've got our Assignable Controls and Console Overview button. The Console Overview button takes you back to this home screen from wherever you are in the console, and you press it again and you get to your meters page, again from wherever you are in the console. So you can be looking over here, you press this and your meters, you press it again and you're back to your main channel overview. Each one of these knobs can either be an actual assignable control for when you're, say, in this view. You see how currently they're not lit up. If I had them set up as assignable controls, now they would work as assignable controls, and I could change whatever I wanted with any of these, or press buttons, etc, etc. But if we go back over here, now they are referring to what's going on the screen. So for example, if I turn this guy up, you'll see my hats feed to aux 14 going up there, and the button below turns it on and off, which on this console is shown by it getting, I don't know if you can see there, dimmer and brighter and dimmer. You also have a Alt button, which this will, instead of turning it on or off, it will take it to either pre or post fade, which then shows as either a slanting line or a solid line on the console. So the Alt again changes depending on where you are on the software, so that's one of those things that you can think there's not a button to do something anywhere on the console, and 2 years later you realise that it's just under that. In a similar mode over here you have an enter button. The enter button is something that I didn't have a clue what it did for a while, because quite a lot of the time it just doesn't do anything. But for example, when we're moving up and down here, we're changing what these controls are doing on the screen. So at the moment we're all the way down at the bottom, so if we move these around here we get our pan, and if we press this we get our stereo bus assignment. We can alt over to here to get our mono bus assignment, and obviously the yellow ring shows you what you're actually selected on. If we then go up to our auxes, usually if we just hit up again we'll move past this up to EQ, but if we stay on our auxes and now press enter, we can now actually change which of our auxes or matrices we are affecting. This again is one of those things that confused me for the longest time because I could never figure out how to move around. But now I've got the console. Figure out, you press enter, that's all you do. Assignable Controls. Moving to the center of the console here, we've got our arrow buttons, which again, depending on where you are in the software, do different things, but up, down, left and right, I hope you understand that is fairly self-explanatory. Just below this, you've got a few different buttons to allow you to do different things with your channel faders. So you've got your button to change between whether you're looking at your inputs or your outputs on this side over here. So when you're on your inputs, obviously that's all your inputs, you go to your outputs, and then you've got all your outputs which you can then scroll through using the arrow keys, or sorry, rather the scroll keys, not these arrow keys, these arrow keys. The Align Faders to Channel Strip button, that allows you to take whatever it is that you've got selected, say we're selected on a bus or anything, press Align and it will pull it up with that bank of 8 faders over here, as well as put it on the screen obviously. Which is quite useful when you can't remember how to get to something or anything. If you've got it selected or you've got it somewhere else and you want it to be over here, just press Align Faders to Channel Strip. Then over here you've got the Extend button, which you can hardly even read the text on because it's pressed so often on one of these Pro2cs. But all this does is it takes your input faders and extends them over onto your output faders over here, which allows you to use the desk in different ways. For example, now when I throw in a population group to take me to my full show scene, I have all of my inputs that I need spread across the entire desk. That just allows you to extend anything that's on this side, extend it over here, so whatever you're doing over there now works over here, and you have 16 input channels or output channels if that's what you want, as opposed to just your regular 8. Below that we've got the screen access buttons. Starting from the top you've got automation/filing, which takes you into all of your different show files and your scenes and everything like that. And then if you press it again, you get into your filing, which is actually like what's saved to the console and what's anything you want saving to a USB stick, which you can put in over here. Next button down is effects/graphics. Again, you hit it once to get to your effects rack, you hit it again to get to your graphic EQ rack. Pretty self-explanatory. Patching/metering. Press it once, you get to your patching. Press it again, now you're on all your metering. Inputs/outputs. This one only does one thing when it actually works. You press it and then it allows you to name all your different inputs and outputs. Press it again and absolutely nothing will happen. Monitors/preferences. Press that the first time and you get into your monitor control. Press it again and you get all of your preferences for the whole console, which allows you to change many different things to how you want them. And then the final little button here is VCAs, which just allows you to name your VCAs, pop groups and mute groups. Doesn't actually take you to the full VCA page that allows you to put anything into your VCAs. So that's a bit interesting that it doesn't actually take you to the full VCA page. But you can press that again to get back out of it. So now we're into what would typically be referred to as the output section. Again, depending on whether or not you have this extend button pressed, that completely takes over this area and turns it into inputs. So we're going to take it out of that and put it into outputs now. When you're in your outputs, you've got 2 buttons over here, the same sort of idea as these 2 over here, and they go from your VCAs to all of your outputs down here, which then again allows you to scroll through them all. VCAs you can't go anywhere because you've only got 8 VCAs on this console, which you can see I currently don't have set up to anything. With these VCA channels, you just get a mute and a solo. You don't get the same LED readout meter that you do on the input channels, which is quite annoying, especially when you're using these as input channels, because it means you've got 8 sets of meters over here, but none on any of these. You know, whether or not you need that is up to you. You can bring up all your meters on the screen, so not the end of the world, but it probably would be nice to have them there. Once again, you've got your scroll buttons for left and right, mute solo, and again, fader. Above that up here we have our population groups and our mute groups. Mute groups, I'm sure you all know what they do. You just have 6 of them over here and you can just assign things to them and mute them all together. Quite useful. They're in a bit of a weird place where if you want to like rest your hand over them, you're going to be sort of on a lot of other things. So some people, I mean, a lot of people don't really use these mute groups. Up to them, obviously. But the population groups are pretty interesting. They are effectively like your own groups that allow you to put anything anywhere. And these typically work for your inputs, so you press any of these and it spills out over to your inputs. But then again, if you have that extend button on, now you can make any of these buttons take over all of this side here, and by setting a little setting when you're setting it up, You can also have them so that you can, so for example I press this master one here and it takes over this side with my main vocal, my backing vocal and my main delay, so I can always have that over there if I want to, no matter what I'm doing over here with other things. Because how often do you actually need to get to your left, right and your mono? The VCAs on this console work in a similar way to the pop groups in that if you press them they spill out. I don't currently have anything in any of the VCAs, which is why nothing's spilling out, but I can, for example, put into this one just some random drums, and then when you're selected that group, they come over here, you press it again, you get everything back. So that's basically this console, how you, if you want to get quick at moving around it, you want to customize these things right here. The way that I personally do it, I just use the pop groups. I don't really use the VCAs because it's only like a 24 channel show, so who needs VCAs for 24 channels? I've got 24 fingers almost. So yeah. Mute groups, pop groups, those are all up there. Useful to know about. Once you understand those, you'll understand this console. The VCAs on this console work in a similar way to the pop groups in that if you press them, they spill out. I don't currently have anything in any of the VCAs, which is why nothing's spilling out, but I can, for example, put into this one just some random drums, and then when you're selected that group, they come over here, you press it again, you get everything back. So that's basically this console, how you, if you want to get quick at moving around it, you want to customize these things right here. The way that I personally do it, I just use the pop groups. I don't really use the VCAs because it's only like a 24 channel show, so who needs VCAs for 24 channels? I've got 24 fingers almost. So yeah. Mute groups, pop groups, those are all up there. Useful to know about. Once you understand those, you'll understand this console. Just to the right of that output section, we have what we would refer to as the master section. So if we're in our normal setup here, it's just set to left, right, mono. Simple as, you know, you've got your full left, right, you got your mono, you can set all your levels. Again, the screens are buttons, so you press them to select them. Mute, solo, meter, same as the inputs have on each three of those, and again a fader, of course. And to the right of that is the monitor fader. So as standard right now, this is controlling monitor A, left and right, but you can also change it to monitor B, left and right, or you can press a button just off screen up here, which I'll show you in a little bit, and that sets it to be the headphones level assign. You want to be really careful when pressing that button, because if you have this set to 0 and you press the assign headphones to the fader, your headphones will jump to unity gain and it will scare the living whatever out of you. So watch out for that. Next to the monitor B button, we have the dim button. Just takes everything down by, I believe, -20, but it might be -15. Don't quote me on that. Dim button, but it, yeah, just turns down whatever's coming out. Useful when you have it set up properly to use it, because you can have, say, always have it on at 0 is like your normal level, but then when you really need to hear something, you're like, what's going on? You press that and suddenly you're deaf. And then just above that, you've got two mute buttons for left and right of your monitor, along with a humongous monitor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And just above the mute buttons, you've got two 20-piece LEDs meters, which will usually show you your monitor, but these also become whatever you are soloing. I think. Right, yeah, surely. Who knows? Well, of course it does, because it's your bloody monitor. Yeah, alright. Monitor levels. So obviously, whatever you solo, you can see it here, and all of that fun stuff. Useful to have your most largest ones of those. The console's a bit dirty, please allow that, because I just haven't cleaned it yet. I've only had it like a month. Excuse me. And then just up here you have a USB slot for storage. So this is obviously where you would ideally put your USB key with any show files that you want to put onto the desk or take off of the desks. Put it in here instead of reaching around the back to that other USB slot. Yeah, you can also, if you wanted to, you could plug a light or the keyboard into there if you wanted to. It doesn't actually make any difference, it's just a USB port. And to the right of that we have the automation section, which includes 6 buttons: last, now, next, store, OK, cancel, which are fairly self-explanatory. These allow you to use the automation in the scenes without having to always be in that page and really be looking at it. if you know what you're doing, then you just hit next through the whole show and you have it all sort of pre-programmed and you never actually do anything. It's lovely. So just to the right of the screen we have your main channel strip, which includes everything to the right of my arm, shall we say. Within that you also have this side of the screen gets dedicated to effectively showing you whatever's going on over here, which is quite nice because you end up with, you're looking at this bit for whatever's going on your current channel, you're using these to affect them, and then over here is everything else. And that's the same whether you're in either of these two main views. So once you understand how it works, it becomes quite nice because you have your visual readout of everything here and your actual hardware knobs to grab and feel over this way. This is the part of the console that a lot of people take issue with. They don't like the way that it's all set up, and you know what, that's fair enough. Each to their own and all of that. But if we start from the top, first thing you have is a mute button, which is for the direct out. I can't currently unmute it because the direct out, for if you don't have it assigned to anywhere, you can't unmute it, which is quite useful because it stops you from thinking you've done something that hasn't actually happened. To the right of that you have 6 channel safe buttons, and again these can mess up your day if you don't know what they are. You press this and it means that no matter what you recool, this channel's EQ is safe, this channel's fader is safe, this channel's whatever you want is safe. And there's no, those, you know, you can get messed up if you're trying to load in show files and somebody has already left these buttons pressed on one of these consoles. So just pay attention to that if something's been really weird and things aren't recalling. Basically, if you see any of these 6 lights up here, or the same over here, they're shown just there, turn them off. Next down from that, we have our sort of input section. Everywhere we go down here, you will see these little white circular buttons. These are all over the console. These are the view buttons. So by pressing these, they light up blue and they take us to wherever whatever we're looking at. So this is the config, as it would call it, area. On here you have torque button, 48 volt phantom power button, phase flip button. Torque routes either the internal torque mic or the internal oscillator to whatever you have it selected. For this, as I currently have a group selected, you might notice that when I press this light over here comes on and off. So effectively this is the same button, but on your regular input channels you don't have this button apart from in the software, so it's nice to have it there. Just below that is a 48 volt phantom power button. Currently doesn't do anything because I A, have a group selected, and B, I don't have any actual preamps connected to this. It's all coming from the DN9650. And then just below that you have a phase flip button, which just flips your phase, funnily enough. Next to it you've got your high pass, which this is high pass in, high pass out. Change your slope size and obviously a knob just to select where it's actually going to. And then the same for your low pass, so you've got in and out, select your frequency, select your slope. Next to that is your actual gain knob, pot for every channel. So you have meter check button at the top here, which just puts it straight onto, I believe whilst you're holding it, puts the channel straight onto your monitor meters. Don't quote me on that actually, now I'm thinking about it, that might not be what that does. I haven't used this desk enough yet. The one down here is gain swap, and what that does is change between whether this knob is your actual gain or your digital trim. So currently I have it swapped so that it's digital trim, and whichever option isn't here will get put down onto the assignable controls in certain parts of the console. So it can be quite useful to know, because sometimes people are expecting these to just be their digital trim, sometimes they're expecting them to be their gains. This is the button that changes that around. And then just below that you have processing order, which just switches it between when the light's off it goes dynamic, insert EQ. When you press it in it goes EQ, insert dynamic. That's the difference between those two. Useful to have. So you can change around your dynamic and your EQ. And then below that we get into the dynamic section. On the right here you have your comp on button, and also again a select the view button over here. When you have that pressed, your compressor shows up on the screen over here. Top button here is mode. On the compressor you have, I believe, 5 different modes in your standard compressors. There might be some more in certain places. Outputs maybe, can't remember. Bunch of different compressors, they all sound great. Use them at your own, for your own fun. This whole dynamic section can also control the gate, which just below the comp section there's a gate on button, an LED for the gate listen, which again I totally missed that a second ago. There's also an LED for the comp listen. And again you have another select knob, so you press that and now you're looking at your gate, which isn't showing anything because I am on a group which doesn't have gate. But if we go back to our compressor, you got your mode button at the top, attack, release, hold, threshold, ratio/range, and makeup. So obviously these change slightly whether you're in your gain or your gate, your comp or your gate, but on the screen it will show you everything you're doing. You might have also noticed that these are capacitive knobs, so whatever I press here, and again this is a setting that you can change, but it physically surrounds whatever I'm going to change on the screen and then also brings up the exact value that it's at, which is really useful when you're not quite so sure where you are in the console, because it does it for everything. You touch things and you go there, so you can be like, oh, I want to look at the EQ. You only actually have to touch these parts and it'll take you to wherever you want to be. So just below your dynamic section, missed something, you also have a knee button which changes your knee from hard to soft, and then you also have these 2 arrow buttons here which change you between your comp and your gate. Again, I'm not currently on a channel that has a gate, so when you change to that, now you can change between comp and gate and see it all on the other side there. For both the comp and the gate you also have side chaining functionality over here. So you can take your key from anywhere you want or sidechain out to anywhere, or pretty much do sort of whatever you want. Just to the left of that is your insert button. Press this and it activates your insert. Again, it will only actually light up if you have anything routed to the insert, which is quite useful again, because if you think you're on your, I don't know, your main vocal channel and you're like, I'm going to whack the insert in and nothing happens, then you can realise quite quickly, oh crap, no, I'm actually on my ride channel, not my vocal channel. And then you have to go over to your main vocal and go, ooh, there we go. Now I'll take the insert in and out. So for the side chain settings, you've got a listen button, which will then light up one of these 2 LEDs, depending on whether you're listening to the side chain of the gate or the side chain of the compressor. And this is also cancelable by your regular solo clear. Next to that you have a menu button, which will take you to your routing page for your side chains and your keys. Next to that you have a width button, which honestly nobody has a clue what it does. It's the width button. I know what that does. Once you've got this guy in, you can change the width of your key. And also the frequency of your key. So that allows you to take a, say you want your, I don't know, you want a compressor that is ducking the bass guitar every time the kick drum comes in, for example. You set the bass guitar compressor to be keyed from the kick drum. You can then select exactly what frequency you want it to be listening to. Obviously this would still work if you don't have the, if you're just using the internal source. You can still change your frequency and everything. Width changes how wide that's looking at, as you can see via the little demonstrationary screen down here. And yeah, menu is the same as pressing source. So currently it's internal, it shows you down here where that's coming from. So below the side chain and insert area, you've got your parametric EQ, which scares some people because there's only 3 knobs and a lot of people are expecting to see a lot more than that. What you have is these arrows next to it to change your bands. You also, as always, have your EQ in button over here, which lights up when the EQ's in, and once again you've got your view button over here, which changes the screen to be looking at this. For all of your inputs, you have 4-band EQ on here, so you get, this is your bottom one, you then press up one and you get this LED, press up again, next LED, press up again, and the button lights up. If you were to be on an output, you get a whole other area you can look at. So you get into 6-band instead of just 4, which does involve the screen moving around a bit, so you can get slightly more easily lost in there, you know. You also have shape button, which when available will switch you between your between being a bell or a shelf or a cut or any of those sorts of things. you have frequency, gain and width down here, which, you know, that's the EQ settings. I'm sure you're all comfortable with those. So then underneath your matrix you've got your master fader area, which this allows you to take whatever you have selected and assign it to the stereo bus, to the mono bus, pan it to that stereo bus, and then this knob changes depending on this button. Without that button pressed, this is your mono level send. Once you have this button pressed, it's now your SIS image, which is for doing much more complicated panny type things, which allows you to move it forwards and backwards in the something or other. When you have it in SIS image, all the way over to the left is stereo, and all the way over to the right is left, center, right. And then next of all of that is your mix sends. This is quite convenient because it gives you 8 at a time mix send knobs, as if you were on an old analog desk. If I haven't said it already, this console is designed to be easily usable for analog people, so they were used to expecting to do all of your sends not via doing fader flip. You want it on knobs. You know, old school, innit? For each of those knobs you have an on button and a pre-post button, and then so if you have these set up as mono groups, these will both be level. If you have it as a stereo group, this will be your level, this will be your pan. And that works down through your first state. You then have a scroll button to take you on to the next state, and another scroll button to then take you into your matrices. The way I have this console currently set up, aux 1 to 8 are groups for just a little bit of compression, and then actually 1 to 10 I believe are those, and then 13, 14, 15, 16 are my effects. So snare verb, vocal verb, first delay, second delay, that one's twice as long as that one, so you use them both, and you know, depending on what you want. So through all of that you can do all of your sends to any of these areas over here via these knobs, which is lovely. Now, speaking of the outputs area over here, these are all your outputs. The thing that I love about the Pro2c over, say, the Pro1 is that you get this lovely array of buttons, which again is another thing that confuses people at the start because they're just not really sure what they're looking at here. If you look at these handy dandy labels, it'll tell you. So these are your 16 auxes and these are your 8 matrices. Right, sorry, the GoPro just died, but luckily we have a USB port right here, so charging the batteries up. Right, where was I? Outputs, something like that. You got your aux 1 to 8, your aux 9 to 16, and you got your 8 matrix outs right here. Very convenient. On each of those you have a talk button, a mute button, a solo button, and a select button. The talk button works within the with the internal talk bus, which is a fairly confusing system in this desk. There's many different ways that you can use it. As a result, most people don't use it, but typically you can plug in here, you press internal talk, and then any of these buttons you press, that's where you're talking to. Nice and simple, and you can do it from here. You don't have to get in any software or anything. One of the downsides of this is that if you're the sort of person that likes pressing this button to turn your mic on and off, every time you press it, it unassigns all your talk. So, you know, just bear that in mind. You're going to have to go, ah! That's why I keep a switched mic for talking to stage with the desk. It's actually just over there. Just over there. You can't actually see it. I'm just pointing. It's that direction. Yeah, so the talk buttons also work for the internal oscillator, so if I hit these now, I'm sending pink noise to all of these channels, or sorry, to all of these outputs, these different auxes, and you can see on the meters where they're all different levels. That's because the aux output faders are all actually set to different levels. And I can go and turn it up and turn them down and change things around. Good fun. Where was that supposed to be? Who knows? We'll leave it there. And look, oscillator on and off, press talk again, and oscillator. And now everything's unrouted again. Can be useful, can be annoying. To the right of that, we have that talk section I've just been talking about. XLR input at the top for your talk mic. Again, you can believe route this anywhere. Don't quote me on that. Do quote me on that. Let's go have a look. Patching, metering. I/O. Control surface I/O. Nope, none of them. Yeah, here we go. Monitor talk in is routed to monitor 1 talk in source currently. So yeah, you can put this, you can plug into here and then route that to a channel if that's what you're so inclined to do. This basically gives you just an extra input that you can do whatever you want with. Obviously it's supposed to be your talk input, but do whatever you want. Don't listen to me. Talk mic. Mic gain. This is an actual analog pot, one of the few of those you'll actually find on this desk. Analog pot does the gain for this preamp right here. You've got a built-in limiter on it, which is quite useful. It goes from 0 to +20, so what that actually means, you know, figure it out. But yeah, limiter, and then you have your actual level. So, you know, nicer than what some actual sound desks have for their... This is nicer than what some sound desks have for their actual input. This is for your talk section. And then below that you've got 4 buttons. Talk, talk, OSC, OSC. The talk buttons are labelled underneath as internal and external. Those are both green. Those work in different ways. Again, I'm not going to explain all of that right now because it is quite complicated. Below that you have the 2 oscillator buttons. Once again, internal oscillator, external oscillator. You can do a lot of things with these once you start knowing what they're doing. Below this you have the button that everybody loves because you can't press it unless you lift this little flap up, and everybody assumes it launches the rocket or whatever, which it kind of does. It actually just sort of ruins your whole mix if you press it during a show, which is why it's got the little cover over it. What this button is solo in place, and this basically takes the whole desk from being where you solo something and it just solos it normally like you'd expect, to when you have solo in place on. Now when you solo something, it mutes everything else. So effectively this turns the left-right bus into your solo bus. Really useful for sound checking, really annoying if you have it turned on during the show, because you go, oh, I want to listen to this, and now everybody is only listening to that. Yeah, that's fun in its own little way. Below that you have solo clear, which just clears your solo from whatever's being listened to anywhere. Press that button and gets rid of it. Very useful when you've soloed something and then changed layers, you can't remember where it was or anything like that. Quite often you'll put your headphones on and there's nothing coming out of them and you're like, what's going on? It's because you soloed an effect that you've now muted or something. Like, yeah, you were listening to the return for that effect. Nothing going to it now because it's muted, so you won't hear anything. Whack that button, now you'll be listening to your monitor bus again, which is once again assignable, so you can have it as whatever you want. I have it set up so that when you're not soloed something, you go back to the left-right mix, which is fairly common. That's how most people would have it. Below the solo clear button, you've got PFL and add. These turn it in the solo bus into pre-fader listen and additive, where if you have this pressed now, every time you press another solo button, it will just keep adding to it. Whereas when you have it off, any buttons you press together will activate together, but if you press one and then another, it will get rid of the last one. So again, that's just depending on how you want to use it. This knob here is your phones / solo A master pot. So this will kick out your phones down to the little headphone outputs which are on the bottom of the console. You know, it's a knob. What more do you want to know? Turn your headphones up. You have a specific mute button for that. You also have, this is that button I was talking about earlier, which sends your phone's level and puts it onto the monitor fader that's just down there. So by pressing that, now the fader, the monitor fader, is affecting your phone's level, which is, that's what I was saying about if you have this knob set like here and you have your headphones on and then you press that with the monitor fader set to 0 dB, you're effectively instantly going bang into your headphones, which, you know, not the most pleasant, shall we say. Just below that, you've got the global button. This is tap tempo for the global tap tempo. Any of the different effects, you can choose whether or not they listen to this tap tempo, or you can set them to their own tap tempo, which you can put over on those assignable controls that are all the way over here, if you remember those, we were talking about them earlier. My personal global tap tempo button is actually the only thing on this desk which is broken, and by that I mean it does still work, it just doesn't flash, which, you know, No flashy button, that's annoying. But one of the settings that you do have in the console is you can set it to either just flashes sort of 4 more times after you've been tapping it, or you can set it to flash continually. Obviously mine doesn't flash because it's been smashed so hard for its entire life, I imagine. This is the button that probably gets abused the most on a console, because you know, every time a song changes there's an engineer going whack, whack, whack. If you've seen any of my videos where I'm actually mixing, I get way too into pressing this button and I'm basically just punching it. So you know, they take damage, but it still works, still counts the BPM, and you can see it shows, you guys probably can't see it, but over here on the console it shows your speed that tap tempo is at, which is useful to see, and you can either display that in BPM or milliseconds. So if you know the BPM of the song, you can stand here going, I'm trying to get to 150, I've got to slow down a bit, that's too slow, speed it back up again, and you know, eventually you'll get there. Probably not, it's a bit all over the place. The only other 4 buttons that I believe I've missed on the Surface are these buttons here. You've got you have Advanced Channel Navigation are these 2 buttons, and Advanced Mixbay Navigation are these 2 buttons over here. So this first button here is called Flip. So by pressing fader flip on the Advanced Channel Navigation, what that means is as you press all of your different AUXs over here, it basically turns the faders into the sends to specifically what you've pressed. Really useful, say if you're using this as a monitor desk, because you have each of these as your monitors, and then as long as you're in flip mode, you just press whoever's monitor you want to be working on, and the whole console works as if it's only for that one person. Press AUX 5, and it also brings up your 5th AUX in the master mono fader. The master mono fader, just this is that blue one there. I don't know if you can see, it's changed colour. Look, now it's yellow, now it's blue, now it's yellow, now it's blue. The reason it's blue is because it says bass on it, and that's what AUX 5 is currently. It's a group. So obviously the fader flip doesn't work particularly well how I have it set up at the moment, because they're all groups. They're not. There's no faders going to them, but these ones over here do work. So next to the fader flip, you have the FX Access with Output Select button. Once you hit this, whichever group you're selected on, it will pull up the effect that is linked to that on the screen. Sort of self-explanatory, again, depending on how you have the console set up. This might work better or worse for you. Next to that, in a separate box, we have the Advanced Mixbay Navigation, which is sort of to tell you that these 2 buttons affect what happens when you press these. These 2 buttons affect what happens down in your Mixbay. Ignore that. GEQ Access with Output Select works similarly to the one we were looking at before, except now anything that has a GEQ on it, which, come to think of it, I don't think I've assigned any GEQs anywhere. Right, let me do that so I can show you what I'm doing. So the GEQ Access with Output Select, what that does is it works similarly to the FX Access with Output Select, only instead of bringing up your FX on the screen, it puts your GEQ onto the Mixbay down here. To show you what I mean by that, I'm going to move the camera a bit. So currently these faders have changed to be into a graphic EQ mode. So currently all the faders are at 0, which is just slightly above 10, but the middle of the fader, and you can move all of these around, you can do your graphic EQ, you can cycle up through it, and then anytime you want to reset any of those, just press the screens and those bands will be reset for you. So you can come through and sort everything out. So yeah, that's similar to the FX output button, but it's a GEQ button. And then the final button over here is MCA Access with Output Select. So what an MCA is effectively the same as these VCAs, except now by pressing this button, every time you select a different AUX, these MCAs are specific, or these VCAs are specifically for that AUX. Which again, if you're in monitor mode and you want to go to anything, you say you want to take the drummer's monitor and you want to take all of the your drums down, whatever it, bad example. Select anything, use your VCAs as contributions to those specific groups. Again, this is somewhere that you can get really easily confused and messed around with, because once you've set an MCA lower like this, taken out of that, turned that button off, you'll never see that again until you press that button again. So that is a easy way, again, to get messed up, is because you have specific adjustments per every aux output and I believe matrix output as well. So yeah, there you go, you see those moving there. The second you turn that button off, you're never going to get to those settings again, so you might get confused if you've got some weird settings in there. Oh my god, I think that's actually everything that's on the surface. There's also a screen over there, I didn't mention that. There's a screen. There is a screen. It's a screen, really, isn't it? Don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but we are just below the surface here, and if you notice, this guy here is a headphone jack, 1/4 inch. Obviously I've got a little adapter on this current guy, but you've got one of those on either sides, so you can have two different pairs of headphones coming into the, or coming out of the console at the same time with two different people on them if you want, whatever. Also means that if one of these goes bad, you just whack in the other side. Happy days. And this is that keyboard tray that I showed you earlier, and where it actually comes from. All the way in the depths of the desk down there.